Postman Pat's Thirsty Day. Stories by John Cunliffe. Pictures by Celia Burridge. From the original television designs by Ivor Wood. Read by the new storyteller for ThomasNumber1Fan2003. It was another hot day in Greendale, a very hot day. In the fields, the sheep looked for any patch of shade, under a tree, behind a wall. They gathered there panting in their woolly coats. "It's a real scorcher today," said Pat to Jess as they drove along. "Phew, I'm thirsty already." The lakes were drying up. The stream was down to a trickle. At the village post office, Mrs. Goggins was outside looking out for Pat and trying to get cool. "Morning, Pat," she called. "Isn't it hot? And we're going to be without water today." "I know," said Pat. "The lake's really low, and they're going to turn the water off this morning. Whatever will we do?" "Well, I filled the kettle and 2 pans," said Mrs. Goggins. They went into the post office. Mrs. Goggins took a bottle of lemonade out of the fridge. "Ah, but they can't turn the lemonade off." "There you are, Pat. Have a drink before you go," she said. Lovely," said Pat. "Thank you. Just what I need." "My, that's good." "That's much better. Well, I'd better be on my way. Thanks for the drink. Cheerio." Pat collected his letters and parcels. There was a parcel marked "Fragile" for Granny Dryden. "Now take good care of that," said Mrs. Goggins. "It looks like something from that catalogue of hers." "I will," said Pat. "I ordered a watch from her." "It might be that. Cheerio." Pat was on his way. He began his round with the village letters, along winding streets, through narrow passageways. In and out of cottage gardens he went, and everyone was pleased to see him. He met Granny Dryden out shopping and told her about the parcel. "It's in the van," he said. "I'll pop in with it later." Then he told her about the water being cut off. "Well, it's a pity the old pump isn't working," she said. "There were plenty of dry summers in my young days, and do you know, that pump never dried up, not once." "I wonder," said Pat. "I wonder if Ted Glenn could mend it. I must ask him. He can fix just about anything." Pat tried the rusty handle of the pump as he passed it, but it wouldn't move. He finished the village letters, then set out for the farms in his van. At Greendale Farm, the water was already off. Peter Fogg was winding buckets of water up from the old well. to get water for the cars. Katie and Tom were helping to carry water to the trial. "Hello," said Pat. "Still have water in the well, then? Let's have a look." He bent over to peer into the mossy depths. He could hear water splashing and dripping, but it was too dark and deep to see. He bent further then. Whoops! His hat slipped off and dropped into the well. "Oh dear," said Pat. "I'll never see that again." "I wonder if I can fish it out with the hook," said Peter. "Let's try." He lowered the hook without the bucket on it and swung it about at the bottom. When he wound it up again, Pat's hat was on it, dripping wet and trailing strands of waterweed. "It will be nice and cool anyway," said Peter. "Thanks," said Pat. "Now I mustn't drop your letters down the well." "No," said Peter. "Thanks, Pat. And would you mind dropping off a drum of water to George Lancaster? He hasn't got a well or a spring, so he must be desperate for water by now." "Certainly," said Pat. "We'll be going past his road end. Cheerio." High in the hills at Intake Farm, George Lancaster had no water at all. He was very glad to see the big plastic drum of water in the back of Pat's van. "Special delivery," said Pat. "A parcel of water. There's no address on it, but it looks pretty dry here, so I think it must be for you." "Thanks, Pat," said George. "You saved my life. We've dried out completely up here." Pat remembered to call at Ted Glenn's workshop and ask if Ted could mend the old village pump. "Well, I don't know," said Ted. "That pump hasn't been used since I was a boy. The works may be all rusted away, but Granny Jordan's lived all her life in Greendale, and she knows a thing or two, so she could be right about that pump. Besides, my water's been off all morning, and I'm thirsty, so it's worth a try. I'll just get my tools. Leave it to me." At Thompson Ground, Dorothy Thompson was enjoying a cup of tea when Pat called with a letter. "Hello," said Pat. "Isn't your water off? Everyone else's is." "No, we have a spring," said Mrs. Thompson. "It comes out of the hillside just above the house. It's never been known to dry up. Not since Granddad was a boy, anyway. And that was a very long time ago." "You are lucky," said Pat, and he told her about the village pump. "I wonder how Ted's getting on." Down in the village, Ted was very busy. He was hard at work on that old pump, and a crowd had gathered to watch and cheer him on. Mrs. Goggins brought him a pot of tea to keep him going. Miss Hubbard brought him a frying pan that needed mending. The Reverend Timms promised to say a prayer for rain at evensong. As Thompson said, there was nothing like a really good spring. But Ted just kept on working. He carefully took everything to pieces. He put oil and grease on the rusted bearings and cleaned all the rust away. He hammered a bent rod until it was ruler straight. He fitted a new washer. He cleaned 50 years of rubbish out of the pipes, old twigs and leaves, newspapers, dirty rags, a dead mouse. At last, he put the pump together again. He tightened everything up and screwed the top on. "Now then, let's see," he said. He worked the handle up and down. Nothing happened. "It's gone dry," someone said. He tried again. There was a gurgle deep in the pipes again. A spurt of rusty water gushed out, wetting everyone. "Hurrah!" they all cheered. Ted went on pumping. The water ran rusty golden for a time. Then it came clean and clear. Pat arrived in time to see it. "I knew you'd do it," he said. "I just knew you would. Granny Jordan will be pleased. I'll take her some water to celebrate." Everyone queued up to fill the cans and buckets and thank Ted. Jess came for drink and had an unexpected shower. When Pat called on Granny Jordan, he told her all about how Ted had mended the pump and gave her a can of water with a parcel. She was delighted. "I'll have to come and see for myself," she said. She opened the parcel. It was the new digital watch that Pat had ordered from a catalogue. "That's good," said Pat. "I'll always be on time now. I'll bring the money tomorrow. Cheerio. Look after yourself." Pat had kept a can of water for himself. Jess kept a sharp eye on it all the way home. He didn't want another wetting, no matter how hot it was. The end.